Welcome to the Perfect Place to Put a Practice podcast by Scott McDonald and DrDemographics.com, the best source of demographic, psychographic, and marketing information for professionals.
Hello, this is Scott McDonald of Dr. Demographics, and today we're going to talk a little bit of an extension of what we discussed last week. Now, as you will recall, last week I described what Hispanics were, their definition demographically and psychographically, and why this is rather important for you. Hispanics are an important part of the United States and are certainly a population that's growing, and many doctors are targeting them for a practice. Now, if that's the case, that it's a population you need to take note of, that's really what that whole last episode was about. But I got a lot of questions this week, and I thought I'd deal with them in a special episode. In this, we're talking about race versus ethnicity. Now, it's a difficult concept, and a lot of people don't quite get it. They sort of assume that demographics are the do-all and end-all of what you need to know about where to put a practice. It's an important part, I will grant you, but it's not everything. And there's important factors that go into this that you ought to know about. So our discussion today is going to be on the differences between race and ethnicity and what research is available for you to know the difference. So let's jump in and let me share with you my screen. Now, obviously, race is not ethnicity, and ethnicity is not a race. It's what it is not is sometimes easier to describe than what it really is. But its implications for what success you're going to have and where you're going to want to know is extremely important. So please follow along with me. Usually these sessions are just about half an hour. If you have any questions, please feel free to write. I'm happy to discuss with you what you need to know. Now, last week, as I said, we discussed Hispanics, and it's wise to recall that Hispanic is an ethnicity, not a race. There are many races implied in that name, Hispanic. So if you were to go to Mexico, you would find there's a large number of people who are white and have some Indian extraction, Native American extraction. But there are also other groups of people that you may not know of. So in Central America, for example, there are a large number of Asians, East Asians, and I'm talking about Chinese and Japanese. Remember, Fujimori was the president of Peru, and he and a coalition of other Asian politicians really kind of guided Peru for a long period of time. The same thing is true of other countries. So just to say that you are of a language group or a country of origin means anything, well, it's a little more complex than that, and I think you need to hear this. Neither a race nor ethnicity are the same. And when we talk about a more subtle division, we go into the country of origin or a language group. Now, just as an example, Cubans are Hispanic, but Cuba is divided into several ethnic groups and different races. It's a fairly small geographic area like the Dominican Republic, but they're not the same. And how they act, how they consume, how to predict what they're going to do is really the trick, and you need to know this. Demographics will loosely predict behavior. The reason that a lot of people want to know what the demographics of an area will be is because when you know the demographics, you can make some generalizations about consumer behavior, what people are going to likely do. Psychographics, however, is an exact study that divides a population up into different characteristics. So if you know the psychographic groupings, and an example that I use with a vendor is ESRI, there are dozens, in fact, of different groups that are not only subtly different demographically, but they're particularly different in their lifestyles. They refer to this as a VALS study or value and lifestyle study. That's why psychographics is so important. But the truth is, most of the people who deal with demographics and psychographics don't really understand the field. They don't understand the algorithms or the applications of lifestyle and consumer behaviors that you need to know. So that's why it's particularly important. When we do a practice site viability study, we're looking not only at the demographics, but we also want to know what the lifestyles or the values of these people are. That's why it's so important. Now, what are examples of demographics? Some obvious ones are how many people there are. Simple. Age, income, the type of house people live in. Those are samples or examples of demographics. And they're pretty cut and dried because you can tell these are facts. When it comes to dealing with psychographics, they're more subtle and the research has to be deeper. So to give you an example, what do people watch on television? It's an example of a psychographic, not a demographic. What do people buy in regards to healthcare? Are they likely to spend a lot of money? Will they only go so far as what insurance will pay in order to get a certain treatment? Are they looking to look younger? Are they trying to gain health that they've lost? Are they trying to move up in the social ladder? And these are psychographic considerations. So it's pretty important, but not something that a lot of people really understand. And I want you to know that's why we go into this study. So it's not just saying, well, we're coming up with a demographic cluster group, which is a paraphrase of a demographic. We go much, much deeper. And that's why you order a report from us. Now, you can get a free sample of a report that will show what the demographics and psychographics are that we're featuring. That gives us a big advantage. And you, again, are going to be able to make predictions that will say, is this a good area for the kind of practice that I want to have? What will the patient flow be? How difficult are collections and production going to be? And it only comes from psychographics, not just demographics. Now, the ultimate thing to know is how these factors will influence consumption. Now, does it matter if people are men or women? Well, in reality, they are population, in spite of what some politically correct people may say, people are pretty binary. They're one thing or another. We may look at characteristics of the individuals, but really the people in the household are going to determine whether it's a good practice site for you, because all of these consumption patterns can be predicted based upon how many people live or are associated with a household. It will influence the desirability of a site for a particular practice location. Now, an example that I often use is the difference between, say, orthodontics and endodontics. There are procedures that are serving different people, but the characteristics of the population are going to be unique to them. And that's why to understand something about what people are going to want and need in a location that they're drawing into your practice will be a very valuable thing. I'll illustrate why one location is worth more than others, or really it's going to be primarily a psychographic factor. Are all locations equally good or equally bad? And of course, that's not true. We know that there are factors about people, and I gave you some already: their age, how many new residents there are, how much they pay for housing. It becomes a predictive thing about consumption. That's why it's so important to know. It also shows why one location should be promoted differently from another. Now, this is going to surprise you, maybe, probably not. You know that there are some people who love discount coupons. And if they get discount coupons, boy, they'll act on it right away. If they could save $10 on a coupon of some kind, they'll think that's the best thing ever. But a lot of people don't feel that way. A lot of people feel that they want more individualized treatment. There are some who are going to want more attention, and those places, those practices, probably are going to be more expensive and be able to charge more. That's why one location that has a given demographic and especially a psychographic pattern will make a determination whether it's a good risk or not. Now, right now, we're living in a time in which the economy is sort of going crazy. So you've got to be particularly careful about where you set up a practice. You're going to likely be in that location for a much longer period of time than you were last year, or at least that's the projection. When a thing like that happens and you're negotiating a lease, you've got to know, is this lease going to pay off? Is it going to be a benefit to have certain characteristics of the site, or is it not? And that's what demographic and psychographic research can tell you. And it's why the potential value of a site in terms of production and collection is going to be greater or less. Now, there are reasons why some sites are really going to pay off and why some sites are not. And that's the business that Dr. Demographics is in. It's not just to say, oh, here's a practice for sale. Is it going to be a good practice? Or I want to start up a practice. Is it reasonable or not? Yes, we can answer those questions, but there's a lot more about how to promote and manage a business, a practice, that you ought to know based upon the research. And production and collections will be manifestations of the data you get. Now, raw data can be deceptive. Does it matter how many competitors there are in a population relative to the population size? You know, the competition ratio. And people will say, yeah, it definitely matters. And it does, but it's certainly not the only fact that you need to know. And raw data can therefore be deceptive. Locations that have lots and lots of people, but none of those people, or a low percentage of them, are likely to seek care from you and are likely to express interest in your services, well, that makes a big difference. And in that way, we want to provide context. And that's what most demographers don't have. They don't have the idea beyond simply stating the fact about numbers, population size as an example, but rather, where is it going? Is it growing? Is it worse? Is it going to result in having more collection and more production in that office or in that location? Where are you likely to draw your patient base? Now, this is also something that our research can tell you, and that's why you need to know it. Keep in mind a couple of facts. A poor area, and I mean one that has low socioeconomics, can be very, very profitable. And some rich areas where people make a ton of money, can be losers. Don't assume that the facts about the people in the area of the practice are going to be good or bad based upon income alone. There are lots of other factors, and they're going to include how much people pay for housing, where they work relative to the site. They're going to age and other factors are going to matter to you. That's why the data is rather complex. And we're looking at a cross-section of the population, not just a fact that you can throw against the wall and see if it sticks. Now, the aggregate is much more important and relevant to where a specific site will work or not work for a specific practice model. What I'm saying is most people don't come from just 1 mile away. They're usually going to come for general practices between 3 and 5 hours, 3 to 5 minutes. It doesn't mean that that's all. There are lots of general practices that they're going to draw from a larger or even smaller area. But you need to know something about why people are living and working in that particular area. Is it a blue-collar site or is it a white-collar site? Are they willing to commute to this location from further away because the services are more specialized? Dr. Demographics takes into account all of these factors and can tell you what's important and what's not. And that's why we're promoting this service. But it usually only works with doctors who are a little smart and want to look long-term. Now, I realize right now, because the economy is not so great, everybody's assuming I got to make a killing right now. But remember, your practice site is an investment in itself. And you've got to know what the long-term prognosis is going to be. Now, I want to take an example with you right now, if you don't mind. There's a thing about restaurant locations. I'm going to use them as a handy reference. You all know it happens that there's a site in which there's a restaurant and the restaurant is dying. No one wants to come in and no one can figure out why. Well, it's probably not going to be because they don't have good food. Most restaurants have a chef or a menu that looks particularly good. But it has to appeal to the demographics and psychographics of the area to be successful. Now, in one particular neighborhood in Sacramento, we found that there was a young population that loved to eat out late. And it was open until about, well, midnight, which is very, very late. And they served only desserts, but they would serve about 10 different kinds of desserts in this location, and the place was packed. You probably know the same thing about Asian cuisine. There are some people who really love the egg rolls at one particular location, and they get a reputation. It is serving the needs and the desires of the people who are in that area. But you also know about restaurant locations that, well, they keep turning over different restaurants in the area, and it has what I call the kiss of death. It's not what people want. It's not where people want to go. And if the people don't want what is served there, I don't care how good the food is, people won't come in. If it's perceived as dangerous, difficult to find parking, where you're at risk if you visit it, nobody's going to want to come. And this is true of every neighborhood in the United States. You've got to match the population with the services, the food in this case, that is being offered. Pricing also has to be relevant. So a really expensive place to go may have great food, but if it is out of the price range of the people who want to go there, it ain't going to work. And that's the advantage of that dessert restaurant I told you about. It's not that expensive. It was a special place and people loved it, but it had to match the people to the service. So why does one restaurant thrive while another struggles? It isn't because they're not good at making food or presenting it. It's because the food has to represent the interests of the individuals who are there. You got to match the patrons with the product. And the same thing is going to be true of your practice. There are some people who are going to want to pay a lot of money for the services you offer. There are some who are not going to pay anything no matter what, no matter how good it is, no matter how charming you and your staff might be. They struggle. Now, certain locations struggle, and it's not by chance. It's not because, well, it's the luck of the draw. There has to be a correlation between the population, the product, the price. Well, as we used to say in the marketing mix, product, price, place, and promotion. They all have to go together. Now, to find Dr. Demographics, you just go online at Dr. Demographics, 800-849-0499. Little thing you ought to know. Our prices are always posted in the drop-down menu. And yes, we have discounts from time to time. Now, I want to tell you about one in particular. In September, we're going to offer a webinar on one of 4 practice types, and there may be more later. We're going to do a special session on orthodontic practices that you should consider. And I'm not talking about, oh, this is the kind of place to consider. I'm actually going to go out on a limb and say, if you want to have an ortho practice, you want to do it from scratch, you want to look for a practice for sale, here's where you go. I'll offer the same thing for endo practice, emergency care facilities, and oral and maxillofacial surgery sites. Look, you're going to invest a lot in the location. You're risking a ton. This is a very inexpensive way to get the answers on the places that I'm going to recommend, and I'm going to be specific. The attendance is going to cost about $65 per practice. Now, what most practices do is they gather around the TV and computer, and they'll record it and then share it with each other and talk about it. We are also offering a $45 discount voucher if you pay this attendance. So you're really out about $20. And I am going to be specific, and we're going to do everything we can to follow up with you. Now, this is not offered to everybody. This is only offered to the good people who listen to our webinars and pay attention to what we have to say. Details are going to follow. But remember this, attendance will be limited, because I don't want to just say we're throwing the doors open to anybody. I will, however, do one thing that I think you'll find valuable. If there is a site or sites that you're interested in, I'm going to recommend you write to me at info@drdemographics.com. And I want you to mention all the places you're interested in. Now, they may not be in the top 25 sites in the United States, but frankly, if you are interested in a location, I'd like to respond to you. But you got to tell me where you're interested so I can do the research and give you demographics. Now, look, this thing is a really good price. I mean, come on, $65 per practice to look at several locations, the top locations in the country in these practice types. I'm pretty proud of that. And I think you'll find it useful. I am also likely in the future going to go into veterinary, small animal practice, and I think you're going to find this particularly helpful as well, and maybe some other kinds of practices as well. But Dr. Demographics is not just a place where we're going to give you demographic data. We're going to talk about the specific practice types, practice models that are going to work for you. So again, we're going to have more information that will come to you later. I want to thank you very much for watching, and we look forward to talking to you again soon. Bye-bye.